Okay, let's start. And hello everyone. Today is August 10th. This is the Velero community meeting. First, let's do some status update. And for the copier integration, and several more PRs has been submitted or merged. So totally speaking, everything's on track for now. And for 191, and some more issues has been included. I mean, issue fixes, and totally there is 9 issue fixes included, and all has been merged. So if there is nothing need to be included next, 191 is hopefully to be released next week. And for the computer refactory, and it is still ongoing, and the VSL refactor is done, and the backup sync refactor is in progress. Okay, that's some overall status. And for the individual updates, and Daniel is on vacation from today, and will be back next Monday. Myself is still working on the copy integration items, and some PRs has been submitted or merged. And besides that, I've also worked on some issue checks and the investigation. Yeah, that's from my side. And Chuming.
For 191, I fixed the issue that is about backup with REST that has multiple BSL, and it is being merged. And I've done the pre-release, the 191 R1 RC1, and we will probably release the official one next week. And I'm still working on the CoPR file system uploader integration. One PR is submitted and others is on the way. Yes, that's from me.
Okay, thanks. And Xin?
I worked on 2191 issues. One is to fix the CSI migration mount volume pass. And the other is to make the CSI volume snapshot time configurable. And I also working on some customer tickets supporting. And that's all from my side.
Okay, thanks. And this two CSI issues is actually important phases, right? So if anyone is interested, you can just check this list for these two issues, and its fixes. And Qixu.
Well, I was working on issue 2413, and I submitted a PR about it, and the PR has been merged.
Okay, thank you. And Scott?
Yeah, so two things. Actually, I'll start with the second one, the VSL credentials. I revised the PR, there was some feedback, and then I actually noticed some recent changes, well, not recent, but later changes for the backup storage location credentials worked. It modified the validation, and also there's a bug fix there. And so I realized those changes really needed on the VSL work as well. So I revised the PR based on later changes to the related backup storage location code. That was updated. There's one act on that now, so I just need the second review. Item action progress monitoring design. I went through that. I added a section to the end because it was pointed out a few weeks ago that there were several initial PRs relating to Dave's prior design that were put in place kind of in preparation for the full implementation. And then there was another PR that implemented kind of basic functionality that was open but never merged. So I looked at those PRs, I added some comments. Some of those we probably need to revert and redo that functionality based on the updated design. There's a couple of them that may be fine as is, but I added some comments there. Yeah, right there, you're showing there. Kind of linking to the PRs as relevant for that. So if anyone wants to go and look at those and comment on my my proposals there as to what I think we should do. But basically, the original design had a completely new plugin type, and the way we're going with this is because we wanted it for regular backup item actions and also restore item actions, is kind of following along the same lines that Dave had initially proposed for the volume snapshot plugin, which was to add API methods to the existing plugin type. So basically, all three of those plugins would be getting new new methods added to the API and new fields added to the execute signature, I guess, on the response. So any of the code that involved creating brand new snap plugin types, we probably need to revert because we're going to be basically using a V2 of the existing plugin types to implement this instead. Again, I think other ones where one was on the backup phases, and again, in that case, we would need to revert that and then add an equivalent version with the new names that we proposed and the more generic, because we're going beyond just uploads. But that was some comments there. So if anyone wants to go back and review the overall proposal in context with those additional feedback or rather proposal bits, because that was pointed out before that we really do need to address any existing code that relates to this. Since we're changing a design, we would need to modify that existing code in addition to creating the new implementation, and that would all be kind of combined in kind of one set of effort there. So
okay, thanks. And we know that Dave's PRs has many of them have been merged into
right.
the code.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that's why I was listing in my proposal, the individual PR saying, this PR does this, and in some cases, hey, we still need this, or in some cases, it's this is a new plugin type. We're not making new plugins type now, so we actually probably want to revert this PR, this change, and replace it with the modification in the V2 of the backup item action and the V2 of the restore item action plugins once Feng's work is in place around the versioning.
Yeah, so so this modify and revert basically means that for some of the parts that are useful for the item action progress monitoring, we will use that, and for the things that are not usable, we will remove that, right?
Right, exactly. And the biggest PR is actually the final one that was never merged. So they had a PR that actually implemented that was the last link there. Kind of the basic functionality. Since this wasn't merged yet, there's no need to revert or change. But basically, this PR will be useful as kind of when writing the implementation of this. Some of this functionality that he has there will be useful as is. A lot of it will need to be modified based on the change in design. Again, a lot of that around the fact that instead of creating new plugin types, we're actually modifying existing plugin types. But some of other parts of what's being done there are still relevant, and they just need to be, the same code needs to be kind of refactored into the new design. So that's still useful. It's just that we wouldn't be merging this PR as is.
Okay.
It would be closed, and then a new PR created that would based on the once we approve the new design, and we have the versioning for the plugin APIs, then we could kind of go along with kind of implementing that.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
Yeah, and Shiva?
Yeah, hi. So I updated the phase 1 PR, which had some latest comments on it regarding use case addition and removal of workflows, which were not part of the phase 1. So I did that. I need some acknowledgements for that PR. That's it, I guess.
Okay, so basically speaking, the phase 1 PR is has been completed from your side, right? So
Yeah.
and so if the review is done, we can merge that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and what about the following thing designed like a phase 2? Have you started?
Yeah, so for the following design, we would need the progress monitoring designed by Scott to get merged first, because we'll be basing off the data mode plugin implementation using the new version backup item action and restore item action plugins. So that will go sort of in parallel, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
and Shubham, it might be that you can go ahead and start working on that design, kind of assuming that you know my PR is going to be merged as is. Obviously, if there are changes from now to the final merge, that might require you to make some changes too. But I think at this point, it's probably fine to start working on it. Kind of assuming that what we do merge will be close to what's there. Obviously, it's not finalized yet, so we could still make some changes at this point.
Yeah, that's why maybe concurrent flows.
Yeah. But to your point, we do need to get this review kind of done for this and finalized, because also to so we can start implementing it. But again, the implementing also is kind of gated on the being able to get the V2 for the plugins in place.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And Wenka.
Okay, I'm also working on the copy integration items, and two of the PR have been merged. And there are still some open issues assigned to me, and I need to do them in next few weeks. That's it. My status update. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Danfeng.
Okay, I'm working on adding AKS to nightly pipeline, so all in test can run on AKS environment. And currently, there are some in test failed, and I'm looking into that. And another work is I'm add namespace mapping to in test this test case. That's all from my side.
Okay, thank you. And if no more questions, we can go to the discussion topics. So the first one is from Shubham, please.
Yeah, so this is regarding an issue which we are seeing on OpenShift 4.11, basically Kubernetes 124. So this is related to restoration of volume snapshot class that already exists. So it's not reproducible on earlier version because there are some changes made to volume snapshot class API in 124. So the restore fails with the logs that the validation of admission webhooks has failed. So basically this should be treated as already exist warning as Velero controller does today. But because the create call is not getting executed itself, so Velero controller, the restore controller is not getting the already exists error. That's why this is getting treated as an error and not as a warning, thus failing the restore. So wanted to discuss on this.
Yeah, and I could add a little more information. I don't remember the specifics, but I remember hitting a very similar issue a couple of years ago. I don't remember whether this was at a community call or this was something on the OpenShift side, but I know I've seen this exact same failure mode before. So I think we probably do want to fix something. And basically what happens right now is that in the restore controller, after we're done with the plugins and everything else, Velero issues the create API call. If the create call errors out, the first thing we do is check to see if it's an already exist error. If it is, then we just compare the objects, and if we either warn if the objects are different, or if they're the same, we don't warn at all. It's just an info log, but we don't error anything out. But if it's not an already exist error, then we assume there was a real problem, and then it's failure. So what's happening here is, because with most controllers, if you go to create an object, the first thing that happens is the controller says, hey, this thing, does it exist already? If it does, we're going to error out with that error. If it doesn't exist, we go through the rest of the validation. But there are apparently some controllers, and the volume snapshot class one is one of them, where it's actually doing some preliminary validation before it even checks to see if the resource already exists with that name. The result being we should be getting back an already exist error, but we don't, because it's failing an even earlier validation that is basically complaining in this case because we already have a default volume snapshot class. Well, the default one is the same one, so the already exist error really should cover it. But because there's something outside of Velero's control that's giving us a different error than we expect. I was just talking to Shubham about this before the meeting. I think what we could do instead is when Velero issues that create call, the first thing we do is always check for already exist error. If we get that error, we just proceed as we already are. But before we assume this is a generic error and we just error out, the second thing we should do if it's not an already exist error is to do a get call. Does this thing exist already? If it exists already, then we can treat this as if it returned an already exist error and then go down that path. I think this would be a relatively straightforward change to the restore controller. It wouldn't be adding API calls except in cases where there's an error on create that's other than an already exist error. So in the normal case where we just created the object, there's no change in API calls, no change in performance. In the case where we return an already exist error, there's no change in performance. We have an additional get call only in those cases where we're currently erroring out anyway. And this allows us to not error out if in the example here. And the problem here is this is gonna, I imagine anyone using the CSI plugin in Kubernetes 124 is gonna see this. If you take a backup with the volume snapshot class, you do, I actually, no, I guess we're creating that in our data mover. So that's probably not going to be always going to see in the CSI controller. But anyone who's messing with the volume snapshot classes and having those in their the backup is going to see this in Kubernetes 124. And the change there is that if there's it doesn't allow multiple default volume snapshot classes. And if we were actually trying to restore one with a different name, this will be a valid response, valid error. The problem is in this case, it's the same name, it's the same volume snapshot class. We're just restoring it. So we need to catch that by checking to see if it exists already. And if it does, then we can follow our usual path. I actually think that's should be a relatively easy fix with minimal performance impact. If people think that makes sense, then we can on our side propose a fix there and go through review and all that.
I can put together an issue and PR with this.
If it has any feedback, I know we initially put this on the agenda, not knowing what was going on, but I was talking to Shubham about this about 10 minutes before the call, and we actually figured it out kind of right then. So we still wanted to bring it up because it is going to require changes to the restore controller, but it's an easier discussion now that we actually understand what's going on.
Yeah, I know that we have some code or something like a policy for the already existing items during the restore.
Yes, we do that, but this is before we even get to that, because right now what happens is that if the item already exists, and we're determining that based on the error code return, or rather the error type. If it's an already exist error, then we either, then we check that policy. But what's happening here is that we're short-circuiting that, and we're actually because the underlying controller that's responding to the create call and the cluster is giving us a different error type. Velero doesn't recognize it as an already exists error, so it's just failing the restore, and we don't even get, or partially failing the restore. We don't even get that option of modifying or ignoring. So what I'm suggesting is that if we get an error back on the create call and the restore controller and the restore operation, that's not an already exists error. Before we assume it's a generic error that we have to fail from, let's do a get call to see if the resource already exists. And if it does, then we can treat that error as an already exists error and go down that path of using the resource policy and all that. This is kind of a separate question from the resource policy because we're failing before we get to that code. Yeah,
resource policy comes into picture if it already exists, then only we process.
Exactly. If it already exists, and we use this new code to recognize, even though the error we're getting back from the in this case, the volume snapshot class, whatever controller is handling that, creating those. If even though the error is the wrong type, we can determine it already exists based on whether it's in the cluster.
Yeah.
And if it
totally.
does, then we go down that path of saying, okay, for this type, what is the restore policy? Or actually, are we just doing that generic? I can't remember now whether we're checking types for that or not. Well, in any case, once we know that it's once we learn from this get call whether we treat this as an already exists, at that point the existing code around the existing resource policy will be applied.
Yeah.
I think we got the similar issue for the port service, and there is there is already some logic to handle such case, but that only for the service.
Yeah, the services are different because
service account.
Yeah, for services, we actually always want to merge those. And what I'm talking about here is not a resource type specific code. I'm not actually saying that we need to make an exception for volume snapshot class. I'm saying anytime that we get back an error from the create call and it's not an already exist error, we need to then do a get call to see, hey, does this thing already exist? Because we've seen now at least two cases, one that we see right here and another one that unfortunately I can't remember the specifics of, but I know I've seen this before, where we're dealing with a controller which in some circumstances won't give us an already exists error because the way it validates, it's checking something else first. Normally we check already exists first, and so if it already exists, you get that error. But some controllers, for whatever reason in their design, they do some other validation before they check if it exists already. And so if those validations fail, they don't even get to checking whether it exists. They return that other validation error. The create call fails. And right now, Velero just assumes, hey, this is an error we can't recover from. And so we go into partial failure. But what I'm saying here is that if we get that situation, Velero can do a get call on that resource name. And if it finds it, then Velero can assume, hey, this already exists. So we need to treat this the same way we treat an already exist error, which is, we either ignore it or we try to patch it. And then, we do go down that path. So this is basically just adding one more condition to that. Because right now we have an if clause that says, if already exists, run this set of commands that includes this set of statements, which includes, checking resource policy and either warning or patching and all that. I'm saying that if clause needs two things: if already exists error, or our get call should it exist. And that get call is only going to be run if error is returned that's not nil, and the error is not an already exist error. So there's going to be a small set of circumstances where we have to make an additional get call, and then after that we have two things to check. And if either one of those things are true, then we go down the path of checking existing resource policy and warning or patching. And if we get back to the thing doesn't exist, so in the case where there's an actual regular restore failure where, hey, we have an error, we can't create this thing, and it's not because it already exists, then that get call will return nothing. And then we still go down the current path of we error out the restore. So the only thing this fix would change is that limited set of cases where a resource already exists, but that resource's controller in the cluster is returning a different error because there's another error and that it checked first.
And two questions from my side. It's like the first one is since the error is not already existing error, so it's the error a fixed one. That is, we can have some opportunity to catch it.
No, it's not a specific error because in this case, it's an error for volume snapshot class. It's saying, one of the rules in Kubernetes 124 is that you're not allowed to have more than one volume snapshot class that are default. So that's a very specific error for a very single resource type. We're not going to be checking for that string. We're not going to make anything specific to volume snapshot class here. What I'm saying is a more generic thing of, we make the existing create call that we already have. We get back an error that's either, if it's nil, no error, we're fine. If we get an error, right now, Velero does just one thing. We check if it's already exists error, And if it's an already exist error, we treat it like the resource is existing, go down that resource, the existing policy path, and any other error we error out. I'm saying we need to intercept that in the middle, and if it's an error returned, so not nil, it's not an already exist error. Before we just assume that we can't recover from this and we error out, we go and make a get call in the cluster for that resource, because we have a, we're creating something. So we already have a name and a namespace and a resource type. We can do a get call for that. If that returns are not found, then it doesn't exist. So we treat the error as a genuine error and we error out just like we do now. If it does exist, then we know that that resource that we tried to create exists already. So we need to go down the existing resource policy path, the code that already exists, and basically treat that exactly the same as if what we got back was an already exist error. And I think this will probably be a lot clearer, to see in the PR too, just to see kind of what the change is. It's actually a pretty small change in logic, but it's one of these things I think it's a lot more difficult to explain, over a call versus, looking at a PR and you see here's the change. It's pretty simple.
Once I do a pull request on this, I think it should be clearer.
Yeah, I think so. And again, we can review that there as well, if that's okay. I just think that because this seems to me like and maybe someone else will have a proposal for a way of doing it that's simpler, but I think this is probably the simplest way of solving it, because it doesn't change the code path for the normal successful case. It doesn't add, we don't want to always do a get call for everything before we create it, because that's going to slow things down. We only want to do this when we hit an error. And we want to limit it to just, okay, we hit an error and it's not an already exist error. But unfortunately, we can't predict, it's just that, we don't want to make a special case fix that only works for volume snapshot classes, because I'm certain there's going to be there will be another case just like this with some other controller, and it might even be a CRD, that's not even in core Kubernetes, that treats errors exactly the same way. And this fix that I'm proposing is generic enough that it doesn't matter whether it's core Kubernetes or a CRD or something else entirely, because we're dealing with everything at a generic level, which is the way, as much as possible, Velero should be doing. We have special cases for, service accounts and various things where we have to, but if we can fix a bug without resorting to special casing, that's better, because that'll fix a larger class of bugs, not just the one we're seeing. I don't want to fix volume snapshot classes and then realizing that some other validation gets added to, OpenShift image streams in some future version, and then that's going to break us again. Because if we just fix once and for all this problem of anytime a controller returns it, basically does other validation before does it exist already, this will handle that.
Yeah, so I think my second question has already been answered. So it's like we want to add a generic mechanism that is checking the existing of the items before creating that. Yeah.
No, actually, I think we still want to create it just the way we do, because I don't want to add additional process API calls for everything we create. That's going to slow down restore. This is something that we're going to add to the error handling. So if the create call returns an error, that's when we're going to make the change. Because that way, if you're restoring 5,000 items and only three items error out, I only want those 3 API calls extra, not 5,000 extra API calls.
Okay, I got that. And so Shubham, you will create the PR, right?
Yeah, I'll create an issue as well and post it.
Okay. So anyone else have any question about this problem? If not, I think I need to move a little back for the status. Because I see Fang is also here. So Fang, do you have any update from your side, like the plugin version thing?
Sorry, no, I got stuck on other work that I cannot make any progress on this one this week yet. So yeah, I will try to see if we can make any progress next week. But yeah, I got stuck.
Okay.
But
Okay. I got that.
Scott have given me enough enough hint for me to move forward. I think I make a mistake of assuming that is in my local directory. So Scott just gave me a hint that I can simply merge my code in and then try to use, I mean, not merge my code, merge in my private branch and use that instead of using from my local directory. So I would try that, but sorry, I haven't had a time to do that yet.
Okay. Okay. No problem. Thank you. We just want to check the status. And okay. And so we
I have another discussion topic.
yeah.
So this is for regarding the data mover feature. So we from Red Hat side would like to do a demo. Like we are doing a OADP operators tech preview feature, CSI data mover. So this demo will likely bring more clarity regarding the data mover design that we want to propose upstream and the feature that we are targeting. So regarding this demo, does it work like the 24th of August China time and 23rd August US time? Maybe we could do a demo after the community updates. Will that be okay?
Okay. So this is currently this is the modules or the code that is currently running with OIDP.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that's
So
right. For
basically-
OADP, we basically implemented this as a separate controller outside of Velero, using the existing, Velero 1.9 functionality. We're hoping to bring a lot of this, again, upstream with the data mover upstream, and then not need this, but this was something we needed to get done for customers kind of right now. So this is kind of an interim solution. So the idea was to demo what we're doing here, kind of outside of Velero, which is kind of pointing us in, which was also based on the CSI plugin as well, with kind of, some discussions around here's what we're doing here. We'd like to, some aspects of that are directly relevant to what we're going to be proposing upstream. Some of them are going to be a little bit different, but this would kind of give some context around kind of where we think things are going with the data mover design for, the 110 timeframe.
Yeah, and we would also like to get some feedback as well. So we would also discuss, like showcase the design, the CRDs that we have introduced, and the changes what we are doing to the CSI plugin. Like those will be the similar changes which we want to propose in Velero upstream as well. So that's why that is the whole point of this demo.
So what is the time? So we want to do that after the community meeting. So do we create a new meeting or just following that?
I guess it depends on how long it's going to take. I mean, Shubham, just let us know how much time you think you need for that. We might be able to do it during the meeting as a discussion topic, kind of at the end, if we think there's going to be time.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that as well. But yeah, I would require, like, if we are going through design and CRDs and demo, then at least 15-20 minutes, I think.
Yeah, so
Okay.
so one option would be to propose 15-20 minutes at the end of this meeting, kind of just
Yeah.
propose another block of time, 1 hour later. That way if we run over, but obviously if the regular meeting, runs out in time, we can get it started earlier, and so we may not need the extra time.
Yeah, anything works for me. I would like your opinion.
Okay. Basically, I think the time is work for the bidding team, and if we want more people to join, maybe we can just ask the same thing on the Slack channel.
Yeah, maybe we take inputs and then decide. We can even do a separate call, if not the community meeting. But anything works. I'm okay with community call as well.
Okay. So yeah. I think currently this in this meeting, we don't have problem for the time, right?
Yeah, I
if-
think so. I think we can do this on the time that proposed by Shibong, maybe next community meeting, same
So
time.
that's the meeting 2 weeks from today, basically, at the same time
Yeah,
we
yeah.
meet today.
Yeah, right.
Just kind of at the end of the, as a last topic of the meeting. And if the meeting, it's like today, it sounds like we're at the end of our topics and we've got about 20 minutes left. If we're on the same time frame next week, then we should have enough time at the end to handle everything Shubham needs to bring up. I'm okay staying a little longer if necessary, if, past the end of the meeting as well. I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We can have that time and have this demo at that time.
Okay, thank you guys.
We can decide that the time for now. If any change, we can just discuss.
Yeah, let us know via Slack. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think this is all the data and topics. So do we have any other things want to discuss? Okay, if no more things to discuss, I think we can we can complete today's meeting now. And thank you everyone. Have a good day and good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys.
Bye
Have a
bye.
good day.